We are live tonight on Standing for Truth. I've got a couple guests with me here today, NephilimFree and Esteban. We're gonna have a good night, profitable, respectful discussion on creation evolution. I'm very excited for it. I'm hosting it, and these gentlemen are just gonna have a nice back and forth dialogue. If you guys wanted to just say a couple brief introductions and then kind of get right to it, that would work for me. You want to start there, Neff?
Okay, well, my name is Evan. I go by NephilimFree. I've been doing creation, Christian apologetics on the internet since about 2007. I'm a young Earth creationist. I believed in evolution until I was about 45 years old, and now I'm a young Earth creationist. And I love discussing the subject of evolution and creation, and the Bible, and Christianity, and atheism, all that sort of stuff. It's really fascinating, huge series of topics, and I find it very enthralling. And I'm happy to be here talking to Esteban.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that intro there, Neff. Esteban, if you wanted to give a quick intro, and then I'll let you guys, whoever wants to start, simply by asking a question, and then start the dialogue.
Well, actually, the only thing I would really want to do is just plug my Twitter, Aposteriori Unum. And yeah, I'm an atheist, and I have a lot of fun being so. Other than that, we could start talking.
Okay, sounds good. So, what's on your mind about these days about atheism or evolution, creationism, Christianity? What kind of things are interesting to you? What do you find yourself turning to, and things that you might think are things that make your worldview seem like it's the truth and mine not true?
Well, there's twofold answer there. The first part of that answer is that I actually don't really spend that much time thinking about my atheism. It doesn't fill my day, and I don't just walk around going, "Oh, there is no God." You know, I really don't even think about it very much. But when I do, when I encounter claims that seem ridiculous to me, see, first and foremost, I'm a skeptic, so I always have to look into those claims, and I have to either debunk them or see that, oh wow, that's true, and so or that's most probably true rather, and so then I will tentatively accept that claim. But as far as, let's see, like lately I've been getting into more of Lawrence Krauss, but not to do with atheism, just his new book, The Greatest Story Ever Told So Far. I listened to that like on the audiobook like 2 or 3 times already, like continuously, and then a bunch of different random segments in between. I think that's, well, if you haven't read it, it's a pretty awesome read. And if you take nothing out of it, I mean, it's not designed to disprove God. It's not, the God delusion, but it's more it's more science than anything, and it has nothing really to do with that. But that's one of the things I've been getting into lately.
Okay, well, so do you think do, do you think the idea of God is implausible for some reason? There's reason we shouldn't. We have. Do you think that there's reason we have knowledge that should cause us to not believe in God, or that God is created, that life was created?
Yeah, well, I mean, creationism aside, uh, the idea of a God, I find to be, well, okay. Well, it first of all, it depends on what definition of a God you're talking about. And when you're talking about like Yahweh, the God of the Bible, well, yeah, he has logically inconsistent uh, traits that you know put all together, he cannot exist,
Such as.
such as omnipotence and omniscience, and then also the fact that we're supposed to have free will, like libertarian free will. Uh,
Okay.
libertarian free will and omniscience cannot both exist in the same world.
Okay, so you understand, don't you, though, that a paradox doesn't reveal truth. Paradoxes are a product of somebody not having enough knowledge.
It's
So
not. It's
there's
not
a
a paradox.
paradox between.
It's a it's a logical contradiction, like a square circle.
No, it's
It has
actually a
nothing to
paradox.
do with-
The paradox is, if God knows the future, then how can we have the free will to do what we want to, since what's going to happen is already predetermined? But but the problem with that is that knowing doesn't equal causation. So if God knows, for example, I see two automobiles moving at 70 miles per hour and they're only 10 feet apart. I know the instant I see those two vehicles are going to crash. Doesn't mean I made them crash, because I know they're going to crash. I know ahead, before the event they're going to crash. But because I know it doesn't mean that I caused it. So why can't that be the case for God?
Well, the thing about omniscience is that means that you know everything that ever would happen, that could ever possibly happen. You already know it ahead of time.
But if
No,
God is outside of time, wouldn't he already?
I
Wouldn't
know
he
you're talking about like an event. Like I know that if there's a knife falling down towards a balloon, that the balloon's going to pop. That's not omniscience, though. That's not predicting the future hundreds or thousands of years, or 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 anything that's going to happen that's more complicated than obvious physics.
Well, what if God created the world and then the world happens because people do what they do, and things happen, and God doesn't dictate everything that happens? It's the machine. He kickstarts it. He pulls the cord on it, and it goes. And then because God is outside of time, He's able to see
No,
all
that's
of the
easy.
things that are going to happen before they ever happen. But that doesn't mean He determined them. You see the point I'm trying to make?
That all that means. All that means is that he's not omniscient,
No. Well,
which is fine. Which is
no,
fine.
no,
I'm
it
good
doesn't.
with that. Well, I don't think he exists at all. But if we're gonna talk about these traits like omniscience and omnipotence and free will, well, the two are actually in fact mutually exclusive.
Well, I think that's just running into a paradox, and paradoxes don't reveal knowledge. You can't get any. You don't. Nobody learns anything from a paradox,
It,
ever.
it,
And so,
it,
and
it's a
so
lot.
that's the problem with paradoxes, is you can't learn anything from them. And so how can discussion of a paradox reveal anything to us? I think it simply boils down to the fact that we just don't understand everything about God's abilities. But you know what I think, honestly, Esteban? I think the atheists use this paradox as an excuse for denying God. They don't really think that this is actually a hard case against the existence of God. I think they've got something that they can use as a tool for telling people why they don't believe in God, not
Well,
that this causes them. I don't believe for a second you came to not believe in God because of this. I think you were already an atheist long before you ever heard of that argument, didn't you? Weren't you?
yes, I was, but anyway, it doesn't apply to a deistic God or you know any other gods out there. I was specifically talking about Yahweh as presented in the Bible.
But okay, so now God, Yahweh is a God that knows all things and has all power, right? And you understand, though. I mean, I hope you understand that I can make an argument that none of the gods of any mythologies of the world, and I call all the religions of the world except Christianity, I call them all mythology, because that's what they are. I can make a case, an argument that none of the gods in any Allah, Quetzalcoatl, any Zeus, Thor, Ra, Ta, Anum, Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, none of them could be considered a maximal being based on what those cultures' religious texts say about them. So we shouldn't even consider them gods. But we find statements in the Bible that tell us that the God of the Bible is in fact a maximal being. There's a very great difference.
Yeah, the book does say a lot of things. The book says all kinds of things, but just because a book says something doesn't mean it's true. But
well, I agree with that.
Well, good. First, Allah is the same as Yahweh. Yahweh is just the Jewish way of saying it, and Allah is the way of saying it in Arabic.
And let me show you how that can't be true. Let me give you an example of, and I'll make it really brief. There's a long argument. I'll make it super fast. How we can know that Allah is not the God of the Bible. Allah is a God like all the other gods in the Bible in the world, except the Christian God. This is one of the great things that separates the God of the Bible from all the gods in the world. And I explained this to you when we had that long conversation. You remember the one we had? All the gods of the world, except the God of the Bible, are able to say, I forgive your sins, go free, without a sense of justice. But the God of the Bible says that any sin makes you worthy of destruction. In fact, I have to exert my character. I must destroy the sin. It must be destroyed. And now, if that's true, then he can't save anybody, because if you commit one wrong unto him, you have to be destroyed, because he can't just say like Allah or Vishnu or Ra, I forgive you and then go free. If a human being came into a courtroom and a judge said, you know what, I'm in a good mood, I forgive you for robbing that store with a gun, go free, the courtroom would erupt, because that's not justice. That judge would be unjust. God can't be unjust either. There must be a penalty exerted for sin. It has to be, because he is the only maximal God, right? So he's the only God in the world that has a solution to the problem. Is if he destroys you, you can't be saved. But death is necessary. So here's how he solved it. He punished himself. He became flesh, took the penalty on himself. Now, if he was to take another human being or an angel or any other creation that he had made and punished them in your place, he would be another unjust being, just like a judge, human judge. A man goes before a judge and he's guilty of robbing a store, and the judge says, you know what, I'm going to declare you innocent, but I'm going to punish that stringy hair that fell on the third row. That's unjust. He can't do that. Neither can God punish Jesus if he's a mortal man, or an angel that he's created, or any other being in your place. So the only solution was for God to pay the price himself by becoming a flesh man and paying the price in person. You see, this separates the God of the Bible from all gods in all mythologies in the whole world, and makes God of the Bible the only potential maximal being, because he doesn't cast his sense of justice to the curb. He can't do that. It must be a penalty of death, but he's fixed it so that the penalty doesn't have to fall on you. It falls on himself. This makes him the only maximal being, God, the only maximal being that could exist. In comparison, Allah says, I just forgive you, you're free. That's an unjust God, because he just wipes away his sense of justice. The criminal goes free without punishment. That's unjust. See, there is no maximal being in the world except the God of the Bible. So I can just say that when you say that the God of the Bible and Allah are the same God, I say absolutely cannot be, because the character of these two beings is completely different. The God of the Arab God Allah is an absolutely unjust, horribly corrupt monster, because he would just say, "I forgive you," and without a sense of justice.
That sounds
So you see, they cannot be the same God.
That sounds a lot like the God of the Bible. In fact,
no. I just explained to you that penalty is certain. There must be a penalty, and Christ took it on himself.
Well, I hear what you're saying. That the Pentateuch, though, it's pretty much the same in the Tanakh and the Quran and the Bible, with some minor adjustments here and there. But that's word choice and translation errors and stuff like that. But even so, you said you just admitted that that the fact that it is written in a book does not mean that it's true. Well, the Quran is in a book. It doesn't mean that's true. Well, the Quran is a book. I don't know why I misspeak like that.
Well, I know, but you know that I'm going to say that I can prove that the Bible is
true, and the same thing applies to the Bible.
no, no, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
No, I can prove that the Bible is inspired by God.
Mythology and except for Christianity, except for the Bible, well, I would just take that one small step further and say that that is also mythology.
No, but see, the difference is I can show with 365 prophecies fulfilled in Jesus Christ that the Bible is in fact the inspired word of God, because it tells the future over and 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 over. And even before Jesus was born, prophecies in the Old Testament were fulfilled even before Jesus came into the world. Like, for example, the Bible says these things will happen to the city of the city of this city, and bam, history proves that's exactly what happened.
Are you going to say? Are you going to say the city of Tyre? Because Tyre is still exactly where it was, where it's always been.
It's not the same city. That's a new city.
No, it's been. They have ruins from where the city was. It's always been there.
No, not a shred of it. No. The island portion of it, yes, not the mainland. The mainland was completely disassembled by King Alexander the Great, and he took every board, every brick, every bit of it, every rock, and threw it into the sea to build a causeway so that his soldiers could walk across it, a bridge, out to the island portion of the city, which was a fortification. And that's exactly what the Bible said. The Bible said that Tyre would be scraped clean like a bedrock, and that's exactly what Alexander's army did. Alexander commanded his army to remove every single building, every board, every brick from every building on that ground. It was gone. The whole city was completely gone and thrown into the sea. It's still there.
The only problem is that that was written after Alexander the Great's time.
No.
And by the where was Alexander the Great from?
No, Alexander was like what, 400 BC, 300 something BC, I think. This was written in, I think, Isaiah, which was 700 BC. So it's like 3-4 centuries before the fact.
Not really sure about that.
Yeah, it was. Alexander came later. It was a fulfilled prophecy. So the Bible does prove itself to be God's inspired word. So you can't say that the Quran and the Bible are on the same. They're on the same level. They're not at all on the same level. The Quran makes crazy, ridiculous contradictions. In fact, a fatal contradiction in Surah 546 and through 549. It declares the gospel and the Torah to be the truth inspired by God, and that Jesus fulfilled the Torah, which means the Quran can't be true. It's a fatal. The Quran literally sticks a 44 in its mouth and pulls the trigger. Boom. It lies about itself. It says, I can't be the truth. Boom. Because Jesus is the truth, and Jesus fulfilled the Torah, and the Torah prophesied of Jesus. Bam.
I'm sorry. Where in the Torah did it prophesy Jesus?
The first prophecy of Jesus in the scriptures is when Satan had beguiled Eve to sin, and Jesus said, God said to the serpent, because of what you have done, I will bring enmity between her seed and thy seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. This was a reference to Jesus Christ. His seed versus so the seed of Satan versus the seed of God, and it calls him a him.
How do you know that that's a reference to Jesus?
Because it calls him a him. I will bring his seed.
I'm a him. It could be a reference to me.
But the God
children could be a reference to you. How do you know it's Jesus?
Well, the children of God are his seed. See,
a bit of a stretch.
And scriptures tell us that we are adopted by God through grace to be his children. So he is the Father. God is talking about himself, the Father of all the saved, coming into his own creation to bruise the head of Satan in that passage.
Yeah, the book says that, and we've established that the fact that it's written in a book does not mean that it's true.
Right, but the Bible then tells us about times 350 years before it happens, right?
Well, it's not very clear that that's
It's very specific, very specific.
It doesn't say Jesus Christ, who is born in Nazareth or maybe this other place.
In Zechariah 11:10, God says, "I will be the one who goes to the cross." He says, they will look upon me whom they have pierced. This is God of the Old Testament saying in Zechariah 11:10, saying, they will look upon me whom they have pierced, and they will bruise him for his, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only begotten son. So God's saying, I'll become my only begotten son, my own son. And they're going to pierce me, and they're going to look at me and mourn, and they're going to look at me as my only begotten son. In Zechariah 11:10, I think it is. So in the Old Testament, that's 2 to 3 centuries before Christ.
Even if you said that in Zechariah, that doesn't have anything to do with what you just said about what Genesis said.
Well, no, but I mean, why don't, if you don't want to believe Genesis, believe Zechariah. In Zechariah, God is talking
written down in a book. It's not like it's any different. It's in fact, it's in the same cover.
Okay, so Jesus Christ came into the world.
Written in this book, do you? You wouldn't believe everything that's written in this book.
Yeah, but Jesus Christ came into the world and raised the dead. He had the power to heal the blind, restore the flesh of lepers, raise the dead. Who in the history of the world rose people from the dead?
Nobody, but how do you know he did that?
Jesus did.
No, but how do you know he did that?
Because the evidence from the text leads me to believe
in the book.
that the texts are an accurate account of factual historical events.
This is the problem. What it is circular reasoning.
No,
I say, how do you know that Jesus did that? And you say, well, because it's in the book.
Oh, see, I can give an account for that. I can explain to you. I can explain to you that people don't lie for Jebus. That the apostles didn't fabricate a fake religion for the purpose of having themselves ousted by their own culture and hunted down by the Romans. Nobody does this. Now, who makes themselves out to be a failure? You know, one who says, no, I'm not, you're one of those Jesus friends. Oh, no, I'm not. No, not me. You got me confused. And then run, make a little scaredy cat, denying the truth. And then,
so what you're saying
is, see Jesus crucified and raised from the dead, they become bold proclaimers of the truth, and they're willing to go to their death for that. Who does that? Nobody does that unless they really saw what they said.
You're saying basically this is the no one would die for a lie.
That's true.
Okay, so when the planes flew into the Twin Towers, did they die for a lie?
Did they know that they were lying? That's the difference. Did they know what they were doing?
Because they literally died for a lie, according to you, because you don't think that the Quran is the word of God, and you think that no human would ever die for anything that was not, that they didn't know was true.
But the difference, my friend, is they don't know that they were talking about a lie. They didn't know it was a lie. The thing is, the apostles, what atheists claim about the apostles is that they fabricated the stories. That means they knew they were lying. Nobody generates a lie to die for it. People die for things that are false, maybe all the time. That doesn't, like a terrorist, but they don't know that they're doing a lie, that they're living out a lie when they commit it, when they die for it. That's the difference. Okay, can you see?
Wouldn't the same thing apply to the apostles then? They didn't know that they were saying something false, and so they thought it was true.
But didn't they know it was false?
What?
What did they say that they didn't know was the truth?
Well, they were saying about the story of Jesus and everything. You know, we don't actually have any texts from the time period,
Okay,
so
so
we didn't
oh,
know anything about it.
we have
So
13
they
guys, 12
could have
guys.
thought that it was absolutely true. They could have read something or heard something from oral tradition and thought, "Oh yeah, this must be
What?
true because
What
my
oral tradition? There's no oral tradition that speaks of Jesus Christ, with the details they put forth anywhere in the world except what they wrote. Don't they
contemporary."
for them to have told this lie, here's the thing: they would have had. Here's the big difference: these men would have had to have, at the very least, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John would have had to have conspired, and then after the fact, Luke and Matthew, Luke and Jude and Paul and the others would have had to then go along with it and write their own. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John would have had to have conspired, sat down at the table, and worked together to tell a congruent story that's a lie. Why should we believe that?
They wouldn't have had to conspire.
They would have had to have conspired.
No, well, all that would have to happen is that Matthew read Mark, copied Mark, changed a few things. Luke read Matthew and Mark, changed a few things.
Well, then you're talking about conspiracy, changing things. They're conspiring.
That's what they did. It's pretty obvious.
That's conspiring.
Well, no, they conspired, but not. They never met each other. Whoever they were that wrote the Gospels.
Well, so here's an argument against that. If we had almost verbatim, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John were almost verbatim copies of each other, then we would have reason possibly to doubt them because one guy copied from the other. But because they tell of the same events in different orders, on different, with individually spoken, personalized accounts, this tells us that they are not. They're not one copied from the other. So there's no reason whatsoever to believe that one is a copy from the other because they're too personalized, they're individualized accounts. If they were too similar, like you're talking about, then we'd have reason to believe one copied from the other.
Here's the thing. There are certain words and phrases that are used in, and I'm calling out Luke, that are used in Luke that Mark used that is very uncommon in Aramaic and in
so
Hebrew, and that
he used what Aramaic words?
So here's the thing: that he quoted verbatim for like long stretches, like 25 words.
Okay, 30, so
and so it's not just that they weren't just quoting similar things. It was like, hey, I'm copying this direct.
No, they okay. So if they spoke 25 words in a row, if you and another fellow
words, that's the key. It's not just like normal words. It's not like I'm saying. I'm not like if I quote like a very common way of speaking in the English language. I mean like things that were uncommon and that the chances of them that all just so happened, he just so happened to speak the same way as this guy Mark from 2 decades ago is just astronomically low.
Well, not if there are two guys sitting in the same room with Jesus when he said those things. Now, the accounts are highly personalized, and there are occasions now when they would speak long sentences that were almost identical, very similar, not a word for word identical, by the way, but very, very similar, very similar. But that would be the case if you and I went to, an important meeting and we were listening to somebody who was prominent on something, speaking, and we listened to him say, I don't see any reason why I would write it down word for word one way and you would write it down word for word and they would very closely match, but not exactly. That's reason to believe that we both heard the same guy say the same thing. You see, that's what we see in the Gospels. And that gives us reason to believe those men were actually present and heard those words from Jesus.
That's possible, but like I mean, like 10, 20 years in between, uh, it doesn't really
So,
indicate that they were at the same event. Like what? Well, for instance, we're both writing about this exact event, but you write 20 years later. Are you going to remember it as well as I do? No, of course not. So that means it's going to be a little bit different. But then if you just so happen to quote verbatim a whole bunch of things that I said, like it indicates to me that you read what I wrote, not that you just so happen to say
yeah,
things in
I
this.
just can't agree with that because they didn't get in the majority of those cases where they say the very same things. They don't get it word for word exactly as the other guy did. There's differences.
Well,
And so if they copied from the other, if they were trying to tell why didn't they just copy word for word verbatim what one said to the other? What they're recalling is what came out of their memory, and that's why they don't match word for word. I've got to take a 60-second break. I'll be right back.
oh, go ahead. I think I'll take a 60-second break as well.
Okay, I'm back. So I think my friend took his own little break. He'll be back soon, I guess.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Oh, you there? Okay.
Oh yeah.
So you know what I think, honestly? I think that these arguments are really weak. And I think the evidence just doesn't support them. I think the atheists use these arguments as excuses for not wanting to believe what the Bible says. The evidence that the Bible is the inspired word of God is absolutely profound. There's a massive, you cannot explain to me how it's possible for somebody to give specific details about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ in Psalms 22, written by King David 900 years before Jesus was born. Please explain to me how somebody could say that Jesus was going to be outrageously thirsty and his tongue was going to cleave to his mouth, how that he was going to be pierced.
Yeah.
How is it that he was going to be surrounded by naysayers who would mock him? How is it that his clothing would be torn into pieces, cut into pieces, and people would gamble over it? How is it that somebody is going to tell him that 900 years in advance that 30 pieces of silver is going to be paid for the price of his life? It's going to be thrown into the temple, then sold, used to buy a potter's field. I mean, are you kidding me? You really think that those kinds of details, somebody's going to know that 900 years into the future, they're going to give those details about one man who is said to come to be the savior of a nation, and they're going to get those things all right in one man that lived 900 years later?
Yeah.
Really? Are you going to really tell me that's plausible? Can humans do that?
Here's the thing. There are many predictions made. There are things. Tell me how they got such good detail into the unexpected party, which is the first chapter of the Lord of the Rings. I mean, how did they know such incredible detail about the different biscuits and the teas that Bilbo had to bring out to all his dwarven guests? It's I mean, I don't know how
Come
that
on,
could even
come on,
happen.
you can't explain to me how somebody 900 years in advance is able to give these graphic details about the crucifixion and death of Jesus Christ, that he would be pierced, his water would pour out. Oh, come on.
It was
Tell me why it's plausible. I'll give you my ear for a mile long if you can tell me why it's plausible to believe any human being can have that many graphic details of knowledge about
I
one man who's born 900 years in the future. Tell me.
I do. I literally don't think it's plausible. I don't think it's even possible.
Well,
I
then
don't.
why does the Bible tell us?
I don't. Well, what does Lord of the Rings tell us? Bilbo found a
Are you
ring.
kidding me? Lord of the Rings? You're
Yeah.
talking about fiction and comparing that to Jesus Christ and Psalms 22? Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding. No, I mean, tell me how. Bilbo found the ring in the cave from Gollum, and he kept it for all those years until his 111th
What
birthday.
is Bilbo a real human being or a fictional character? Because Jesus of Nazareth was a real human being. Historians are in agreement completely. We have more knowledge of him from his time period, according to Bart Ehrman, who is an agnostic scholar hater of Christianity, than any other person from his time period. The evidence that Jesus walked the earth as a man, a real Nazarite, is absolutely overwhelming. Okay, so Jesus was a real man, but you're comparing that to Bilbo Baggins, a fellow who's a fictional character in a book written in the 20th century?
I'm fully aware that Bilbo is a fictional character. And what I'm saying is that I have the same amount of evidence that Bilbo is real as you do Jesus is real.
Nonsense. Jesus was a real human being who walked the earth. I've just got through telling you this.
Well, I mean,
Historians are in unanimous agreement about it, except whacknuts like maybe Richard Carrier.
show me something that's not in the Bible that proves that Jesus ever walked the earth.
Wait, are you telling me that you doubt that Jesus of Nazareth was a real human being that had a religious mission and spoke and got himself in trouble with the Romans and was crucified? Are you telling
Yeah.
me that's not true?
And I'm not saying it's not true, but I don't see any evidence that it is true. So
Okay, so I'm not going to spend the next hour giving you the information, evidence for that. I would just, because that would just eat up our time. There are, it's just too much. Okay, so what I would investigate, it just suggest to you, is that you investigate the case for that, because it's so strong that you're hard pressed to find a single historian in the last 30 years that doesn't agree. Any historian, secular historian, mainstream secular university historian who would dare say to his peers, Jesus was of Nazareth, is a fictional character. You
I,
won't
I,
find any.
I know that it's a very unpopular opinion, but
Well, brother, I'm going to say, if you have to go there, that you actually believe that Jesus, to use the idea that Jesus of Nazareth was not a real human being in order to support your whole arguments or your belief system, I'm going to say your argument it's bust. It's
well,
bust.
even if I grant you that Jesus existed, it wouldn't really make a difference because that doesn't get you anywhere to proving that God exists or that creation
Well,
happened.
it does, because he was actually crucified by the Romans. He was stabbed. We have a historical record that he was stabbed in the ribs. His water and blood poured out. The 30 pieces of silver was paid for a price for his life, thrown to the floor of the temple, which was used by the Sanhedrin to buy a potter's field, which is a field to bury travelers through Israel who were not Hebrews. They wouldn't bury them with where the Jews were buried, so they because of their religion and their practices. So they bought a separate field to bury people who were non-Jews in Israel. They buried them out there, away from us Jews. We bought a separate field. That's where they would bury them. And that potter's field, you can go see it to this day. We know where it is. Tradition is, that's only 2,000 years ago. I know it's a long time, but in history, that's really not that long ago. I mean, we have secular historical evidence for Genghis Khan and for all kinds of people and for people that lived before Jesus, Alexander the Great and everything. And we have historical evidence for Jesus of Nazareth, lots of it. In fact, more for him than we do for most people within 300 years of his life.
Well, I agree. There's more written about him, but I don't.
Well, that's the historical evidence. I mean, and then there's the archaeological evidence too.
Oh, no. This is the exact reason why I brought up the Lord of the Rings. It was kind of a quip. It wasn't that I, think whatever. It was a quip. It's because that I know that being written down doesn't mean that it's historical evidence. And we established that in the beginning, that just because it's written in a book doesn't mean it's true.
So what about Plato? Did Socrates exist? Because we have one human being in history that wrote Socrates one. His name was Plato. No historian in the world doubts that Plato or Thales and Miletus existed, but we've got one reference in all of history for those guys. One. But we've got how many for Jesus, which was centuries later? Oh, you come on, look, this is a bust argument. That's a failure. You're going to have to try something better than that. Claiming Jesus we don't have reason to believe Jesus existed. It's just a bust.
Okay, you were correct on the second one. I'm saying we don't have reason to believe he exists. I'm not saying he didn't exist. He may have been a person, or he may have been a fictional character that was euhemerized later. I don't know. But I don't put my money on Jesus, and I don't, just because it was written in the Bible. I know what the Bible, believe it or not, I have read the Old Testament and the New Testament all the way through. And, some of it is really boring, so I really don't remember, numbers so much. But except for the terrible stuff, I do remember that. But,
we'd have to toss out a tremendous amount of known history if we used your standards about Jesus. Then everything that had lesser evidence we would have to just dismiss and say we have no reason to believe it. You know what would happen? About everything that happened on the earth prior to 2500 BC is just gone.
But where is the history, though? Do we have that in any other source other than the Bible? Is there anything extra biblical that can confirm anything inside the Bible?
Well, see, now that argument is predicated on the idea that we can't accept that the Gospels are actual evidence, historical records of the man Jesus, but that's just not true. Here's the thing: the atheists say, "Well, but they're the Bible." So what? They're Bible. What if we took the books out of the Bible and said, "Here's the book of Matthew. There's a man who claimed to have been an apostle with Jesus. Oh, look, he writes in there. He knew Peter. He knew James too. And then we go to James. Oh, James knew Peter. Wow, how about that? And he was written at the same time. And then James knows John. Wow, and John. Then John says he saw Peter and James talking to each other. Wow, these guys all knew each other. These are individual historical records. See, what atheists try to do is group them together because they all talk about Jesus because they were contemporaries with Jesus, and discredit them, but just summarily just say you can't believe them. No, that's not so. They're individual written accounts of individuals who all walked with, spoke with, ate with, talked with Jesus of Nazareth.
No, we know that's not true. We know that
we know that is true. You just won't accept it's true.
We know that the earliest book written in the entire Bible is by Paul in the New Testament.
No, the oldest book in the New Testament is not Paul. Paul was a latecomer. The earliest book by Paul was like 45 AD or something.
Yeah.
James and John were written before that, I believe.
Yeah, no.
No, not John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke were written before Paul.
No, they were not. Mark was written in like the 60s, Matthew the 70s, Luke the 80s, and John as late as 105.
Okay, so maybe not 105. I might have been wrong too on that. Let me get my text file up on this, and I'll give you the dates for these books. Okay, Mark was written about 50 AD, Matthew 55, Luke about 60, Acts 65, John 90 AD, James 45 AD, 1 Peter, 2 Peter 60, 1 John, 2 John, 3 John 90 AD, Jude 60 AD, Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, Titus, and Philemon, all written by Paul, 50 to 70 AD. Okay, so we've got Paul and Mark are contemporaneous of 50 AD. Both would be considered equally of the earliest texts. Okay, so Mark is as early as Paul.
Paul and Mark can't do overlap on their estimated times, but the fact that Galatians and Thessalonians and everything and Timothy were written in, as early as 50, generally most of the scholars agree that Paul was the earliest writer of any of the New Testament. I don't think you disagree with that.
No, I actually do. I think Matthew was probably written before Paul. Mark was probably
before Matthew.
But historians think they were written approximately the same time, about 50 AD.
Well, not just historians, also theologians,
right,
believe that Mark was written before Matthew.
Well, you know what? I just think that, from what I'm hearing, I think you're using very weak, very lame arguments as reasons to not believe in God. I don't find any legitimacy to any arguments that you put forth. I see them all absolutely weak. In fact, and some of them are denial of things that are demonstrably true. I don't see that as valid. I mean, you're going to have to do better than that. Well, if you're going to tell me you have reason to believe God doesn't exist, than to make these terribly weak arguments against the Bible.
All right, two things. First, I'm not making arguments against the existence of God. Right now, what we've been talking about.
That's what I asked you for, and you turned to the Bible.
What we're talking about now is Jesus. Yeah, I don't know if Jesus existed. I'm not convinced that he did. So yeah, that's one. And
well, you know what I would say to that? I would say, why in the world would I debate some guy who denies the historical evidence of the existence of Jesus of Nazareth? Be honest with you, really. I mean, I'm not trying to be insulting. I'm just being honest. When secular historians or university-wide, you can email the department of head of history at University of Michigan, University of California at Berkeley. Just pick a university and ask them, was Jesus of Nazareth a historical person? And every email that came back to you, if you got a response, because these guys are real busy, would say, well, of course.
That's an argumentum ad populum.
And most of those guys would be atheists, probably. Half of them, I bet.
That's an argumentum ad populum.
Okay, so they're scholars on the matter, and you and I don't have nearly as much knowledge about history as they do. These guys are experts, you and I are not. Right?
Well, I agree with that.
So, now, honestly, I wouldn't accept the testimony of evolutionist scientists who are PhDs and experts in certain fields, and I am not. So I understand the irony of the contradiction of what you're saying. But nonetheless, I mean, sometimes it's a valid argument, sometimes not. I just don't see, these all sound like weak arguments to turn on the Bible. I mean, really, an atheist, in my opinion, from all the discussion and debate I've had with atheists and all the arguments I've heard from atheists, and I've heard them all. I've heard all the atheist academics. I've watched their debates. With people, academic, PhD Christian theologians and everything. I've watched all that. I spent thousands of hours on the internet watching what these experts have to say. And, I just come across lame. They all turn on the Bible. You got to do better than attacking the Bible or the historicity of Jesus if you're going to tell me you got reason not to believe in God.
What else do you have me to attack?
Philosophical arguments, scientific arguments.
Well, God has nothing to do with science, so I can't see any arguments in that field. But
Well, if God existed, then he's the cause of all things. Science exists because of God, right?
not necessarily, not if God doesn't exist, right?
How is it possible for science to exist prior to the one who's eternal?
Well, how do you know? No. God has nothing to do with science. It's not a scientific argument. If
I mean, God
anything,
has everything to do with science. If God exists, science exists because of God.
so if that's the big thing is if God exists, but we don't know that yet. So
No, we know it. You refuse to accept it.
we have to find out first, and then we could say, okay, well, God exists, then this is why science exists.
You know what, friend? What's so easy to find out whether or not God exists? Get on your knees and put your hands and folded in prayer and bow your head down and say, God, if you exist, I've broken your law and I've offended you and I want to be forgiven, because if you've got paradise to give somebody, I want it.
I do.
And you could find God in a minute, but you won't do it because, like C.S. Lewis, the Christian apologist who was an atheist turned Christian, said, an atheist can't find God for the same reason a thief can't find a policeman. That's cold, but he's absolutely right. You could find God. You don't want to do it. And when we had our long conversation on the telephone about 2 months ago, I told you that very thing. And you still haven't got on your knees and asked God to tell you if he exists or not. Said you don't have the humility in you to ask God if you exist. If you exist, can you show me you exist? Because I want to know for sure. And why don't you? Do you lack the humility to do this?
I don't, but if God wanted me to know that he existed, he knows exactly what to do to make me believe in him.
Right, now that's where you play a game. You know, God's got to come into my world and prove himself to me. Why is he obligated? Why is the author of the universe obligated to reveal himself to a worm? I mean,
Maybe,
now
maybe
here's the thing. He
he loves
loves you.
you, and
He
he's not.
loves you, but he's God Almighty. I mean, seriously, you're telling me that, look, that's like a student walking into a classroom, sitting down in a geology professor's class who's got a PhD, master's degree, and BA in geology, and saying, if you want to prove to me that you know anything about geology, you're going to have to prove it to me, because I don't believe you know anything about geology. Is that arrogant or what? That's what I'm hearing from you. I don't believe you exist. You're going to have to enter my world and do some extraordinary, mystical, magical thing to prove you exist. I'm going about my life not believing in you because you haven't made the effort to make me believe in you. But you're talking about God. What happens when you walk up to the Emperor of Japan
Hold on.
in 1100 AD and stare him in the eyes? Your head comes off your shoulders.
Hold on. If he loves me and he wants to have a personal relationship with me, if he really wants that, and he wants me to know that he does exist and that he does love me and that he does want to have that personal relationship, he knows exactly what to do to make that happen. He has not done that, so what do I do?
So that's like telling me that everything about the world in your life is possible to exist in its astonishing beauty and complexity and everything without God. I just don't have any reason to believe God exists. All this stuff could be as complex and beautiful and intricate as it is without God. Don't have any reason to believe. Really? I don't find that plausible. So that leads me to ask you, what in the world would make you think that a world as complex, intricate, beautiful, emotional, and powerful, and astonishingly complex, as intricate and interdependent as this beautiful, unfathomably complex world could come to being without an intelligent agent? You know, the more our technology increases, the more intricately they look into a cell, the more complexity they find. They still haven't found all the complexity there, and probably never will, right? So I mean, it is mind-bending complexity in something so small you can't see it with the naked eye. What makes you think that it's plausible? See, if I compared your disbelief about God and the Bible and the historicity of Jesus and everything to your just a priori belief that something as mind-bendingly complex as a cell, which can't be seen with the naked eye, so infinitesimally small, and yet is more complex than New York City, and we still can't find all the complexity in it with scanning electron microscopes, because our technology of making images at that scale in real time is not good enough yet. And your belief that that can come into existence because molecules bump into each other. Do you see what I'm saying? I see people like me see an outrageous, ridiculous faith on one hand, while denying a mountain of evidence and reasonability on the other hand. Do you see the great chasm that I'm talking about?
I'm always impressed with the arguments about complexity, because I don't even see the relationship between complexity and a magical space wizard that created everything. It doesn't even.
Well, let me address that for a second. I hear people say, like somebody in the chat is saying, it's complex, therefore God. Then we hear atheists say this all the time. Exactly. Absolutely. That's right. Because science shows us that things that are highly complex do not arise from chemistry.
That's not what it says.
Science does show us that.
It does not say that.
It does show us that.
We understand what evolution is. We understand what quantum mechanics is.
Nobody has an account for abiogenesis.
Nobody. We understand more or less what the fundamental particles do and their interactions and the fields involved. But it's like complexity has nothing to do with it. It's complete non sequitur.
Complexity does have something to do with it, because there is something about plausibility. Plausibility that happenstance associations of matter are capable of arranging matter in such a manner into such astonishing complexity. Chemistry and every chemist on the planet has known since the late 1700s, matter just doesn't do that.
How are you determining the probability of these things? Do you have anything to compare them to?
Well, I can give you one account for proteins.
Do you have another world, another universe that doesn't have a God to compare the?
Wait. You're making an argument against the existence of God by pointing to an imaginary universe somewhere else?
Not exactly. I'm just saying about the probability. How are you determining the probability? You don't.
We only have the universe that we exist in to consider the probability of matter coming into its complexity and interdependence as it is in this one. Why do I need to appeal to an unknown, something else?
I'm not appealing to that. I'm saying that how are you determining the probability absent the other universes that?
Because what other universes? What are you talking about?
I'm not saying that there are. I don't believe
universes.
I'm saying that you're comparing things that don't exist. You're saying the probability of X happening without the existence of a God.
Well, what universes?
Is what? I'm not saying that there are other universes.
Well, then that's why are you using them as an argument against the complexity of the universe that we know exists?
No, I'm using it as an argument against the fact that you use probabilities.
We can do that in this universe.
Yeah, but how do you determine the probability? What is the probability that God exists in this universe?
Well, when it comes to complexity, I can give you an argument from proteins.
No. That's not what I mean. How do you determine the probability that a God exists in this universe? that we exist in?
Proteins.
That
I mean, I could do it in lots of other ways. You asked me how.
possibility?
We're talking about the complexity of matter and its arrangement in something in organic life, and I said proteins. Proteins tell me God exists because
No,
proteins are specified complex, a product of specified complex information, and the intricacy of these machines created by by the genetic information that code for proteins. I don't know if you know what a ribosome is, but it is a
I do.
monstrosity of complexity. A monstrosity of complexity.
I know.
The very location of the various amino acids in this monstrous machine made of gigantic proteins with thousands of amino acids is so utterly intricate that the location of the various amino acids in these multi-thousand protein components are so specific that when a particular amino acid is brought into it with a transfer molecule, it's either accepted or rejected based on whether on the shape of the molecule, if it's exactly right, it's bonded and the amino acid is snapped off and attached. And then the transfer molecule is released, and it goes. Another one comes in, and this happens so fast. Just like the perfection of this machinery is astonishing. Okay,
Oh,
and it's comprised of thousands upon thousands of amino acids in their exact locations, so they match specifically with the amino acids in the shape of another protein. That complexity of that, it's more complex than any internal combustion engine ever made by man.
yeah.
Far and away. Far and away.
All of that is amazing and fantastic.
Right. And you are willing to believe in your faith that mind-bending complexity can arise chemically without intelligence.
Exactly.
Can
Very
you
good.
tell me why?
I don't know why.
Then why do you think it's plausible? Why do you say it's? If you don't know why do you believe something you don't know why you believe it?
Hold on, because I don't see any evidence to the contrary that it didn't happen naturally.
So if you don't know why you believe it,
No, I know why I believe it. I just don't know. No. Hold on. I don't know why things are so complicated. Things are so. No. I don't. I know why I believe it. I believe it because I don't see any other evidence to suggest anything different than that.
When you say that, what you're telling me is that you believe it's plausible that kind of interdependence and complexity can arise because molecules bump into each other.
Yeah.
What reason in the world do you have to believe that when no chemist on the planet tells us that a scientific method by which that's plausible?
I don't know what you're talking
about. Not one.
I don't know what you're talking about when you're saying what chemists say, bumping into each other.
Well, chemists struggle to make molecules. It's a chore, and most of what they try to make fails, and they throw it out, and it gets burned. And then they clean the equipment thoroughly. They start with fresh equipment, and they try again and again and again, and eventually they're able to build a molecule that they want to. It takes people with PhDs struggle like crazy to build a specific molecule that's the shape they want, and most of their attempts are complete failure. And yet, this kind of complexity that we're talking about biological life is unfathomably more complex. Simple that they can build, and they're using human intelligence. But you're telling me unguided, unintelligent, undirected molecules can do what PhD chemists can't even approach doing.
That appears to be the case, is what I'm saying.
I would just say that's faith that is absolutely unsubstantiable. That demonstrates to me. It demonstrates to me that you're believing something not because of the evidence, but because that's what you want.
Please let me say something. What does what does the complexity of life have to do with the existence of a supernatural being?
I think I just touched upon that.
I know you didn't, though.
I
The
did.
thing.
I said,
A supernatural being is outside of nature, and then you're appealing to things that are in nature, and you're saying that these things that are in nature are so complex, which I agree with. Yes, they are very unfathomably complex. But how does that indicate the fact that there is the existence of a supernatural being? It doesn't make any sense.
because it takes intelligence to create life.
Why do you think that?
Because the information that I'll explain.
Okay.
The information in the DNA is complex. Firstly, the DNA is information. Information can't be created by nature. It always it always originates by a volitional act from an intelligence. I've got a video on my YouTube channel called the the Genetic Information Challenge. Nobody's attempted to do anything about it yet. I've been searching the internet, Aaron Raw, all the famous atheists in the world. Not one of them has made a video response to my question. Not one. It's been up there for a couple of months now. It'll be there forever because they can't. Because you cannot explain. Wait a minute. There's actually one, but it was a failure because, well, I don't want to go into it. It takes too long. The point is this: information only arises from intelligence. DNA is obviously information because it specifies the finished product. It specifies. It tells us how to make something. It's a code. You know, if you find words in a book that say instructions on how to assemble something, we all automatically understand that comes from an intelligence, right? So DNA is the same way.
It's not really a good analogy, no, but it is. I see where you're going with that.
I just think you're not willing to believe in God because you don't want to. There's no. You don't have any scientific argument. You don't have any historical argument or philosophical argument. You just don't want to believe in God.
No, it's not that I don't want to. That doesn't even make sense. It's not a choice that you make. You don't make the choice that, hey, I want to believe in God. I don't want to believe in
No,
God.
I disagree. I think atheists are all people who say they don't want to believe in God.
No. It's not a choice you make. The same as like being gay or something. You can't choose to be gay. I mean,
I disagree.
Well, I mean,
I disagree, but let's not turn this into a discussion about that subject because that's not,
No, it's
not what we're about.
Thing. You don't choose to believe in something. You're convinced of it, and you either believe it or you don't.
I disagree.
You're convinced. Well, it's not a choice.
Actually, hey guys, I'm gonna jump in here real quick. Just seen some requests in the chat for the last little while. Everyone's enjoying. It's been fun. It's been engaging. It looks like we should take a shift to say the topic of creation evolution. I'm not sure who wants to start it, but maybe either Neph can give his favorite or his number one best evidence against evolution, or Esteban can give what he believes is the number one best evidence for evolution. So whoever wants to start, maybe that can be, we can do a shift in discussion. Go ahead, guys.
Nephilim can start, but just maybe take a 30-second or 60-second pause in between.
Sure, give me a 60-second break, and I'll present to you a reason from science that we can know that life is designed by an intelligence. Be right back.
I want to hear it.
Esteban, are you saying that you wanted like a 60-second pause after like a 60-second increment, or just
a 60-second pause right now, and then when we both get back, then we'll continue to do exactly what you said.
Beautiful. Sounds good.
All right.
Break time.
Break time.
Well, guys, I hope everybody is enjoying the discussion so far tonight. We want to put on more of these discussions, these debates. whoever is willing, whether, atheist or creationist, we want to see more of these types of discussions on different views. Neff and I mean, we've had a challenge out. I mean, we will pretty much debate any evolutionist as long as we all agree on a specific structure, format, whether it's my channel, Neff's channel, modern day debate. I definitely want to give a shout out to modern day debate. If you guys haven't seen, last night we did a Lion's Den debate. So it was me and Esteban here, as well as Joseph is who it was. So that was a very good debate. If you guys want to check that one out. End of the month, we got Kent Hovind coming on again. He'll be debating Adam Heap. I think his channel is A Heap of Games, it's called. I've debated him. Neff has debated him. Hovind debated him on my channel 2 months ago on Common Design. So this time it'll be on the Flood. So guys, stay tuned for that. We got a lot of exciting things in the future. Okay, so it looks like Neff is back. Esteban is back. It looked like we were going to take a shift to from this topic to creation evolution, but did you want to? Looks like you were going to touch on intelligent design there, Neff. Or
yes, is my screen sharing working?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah. So the simplest and most obvious reason we can know that life was in fact intelligently designed is the fact that it's the DNA molecule is a physical medium encoded with information which is organized linguistically and operates algorithmically. And what do we know about information? Well, information is a non-physical material entity. It's not comprised of, nor is it a property of matter. It's purposeful. It describes or prescribes something that's meaningful, such as data, function, concept, or process. It cannot be physically measured, has no dimensions, no mass, so it's non-physical. You can transcribe it. It's not bound to whatever medium it's encoded upon. In other words, you can take the Bible and you can write it in the sand. You can write it in the sky with an airplane that writes with smoke. I can type it out in an email and send it to you. Every example, the information doesn't change one bit, but the medium does, because information is non-physical. In other words, it's not a material thing. It's an immaterial abstract construct of the intelligence of the non-physical mind. Okay? So this proves to us the information is non-physical. Non-physical things don't have a physical cause. A man standing in front of an audience giving a speech, if information were material, he would have to be sharing brain matter with every individual in the audience in order to share that information. That's not the case. He's just sharing abstract constructs because the information doesn't exist physically. It's non-physical. This is because it's a product of a non-physical mind. Okay. There are 10 laws of nature about information that prove that DNA is empirical evidence of intelligent design. Anything material, such as physical or chemical processes, cannot create something non-material. Information is a non-material fundamental entity and not a property of matter. Information requires a material medium for storage and transmission because, of course, we exist in a physical substrate that is material. Information cannot arise from statistical processes. There can be no information without a code. In other words, no knowledge can be shared without a code. You have to use facial expressions, hand signs, writing code, letters, text, anything. But there must be a code if you're going to share information. Okay. Without a code, no information is shared. All codes result from an intentional choice and agreement between a sender and a recipient. The determination of meaning from a set of symbols and is a mental or application of them to a set of symbols is a mental process that requires intelligence, not a material one. It's not a chemical one. There is no new information without an intelligent, purposeful sender. Any given chain of information is traced back to an intelligent source. All examples. There are no exceptions. Information comprises the non-material fundamental foundation for all technological systems, works of art, or biological systems. Now, therefore, since information, the DNA code is of life, all life is clearly within the definition domain of information, we conclude that there must be a sender. Since the density and complexity of DNA encoded information is billions of times greater than man's present technology, we conclude that the sender must be supremely intelligent, since the sender must have encoded the stored information in the DNA molecule, constructed the molecular machine, biological machines required for the encoding, decoding, and synthesizing processes, and designs of the features of the animal, or therefore designed the organic life forms. We conclude the sender must be purposeful and supremely powerful. Since the information is a non-material fundamental entity and cannot originate from material quantities, we conclude the sender must be a non-material, have a non-material component. Since information is a non-material fundamental entity and cannot arise from material quantities, and since information also originates from man, we conclude man's nature must also have a non-material component, or spirit, just like the Bible says, like every believer says. Since information is a non-material entity, we conclude that the assumption the universe is comprised solely of mass and energy is false. Since biological information originates only from intelligent senders, and all theories of chemical and biological evolution require information must originate solely from mass and energy alone without a sender, we conclude that all theories and concepts of biological evolution are false. The laws of nature about information have verified that life was created by a supremely intelligent mind, and all theories or concepts of biological evolution are false. It is impossible. Evolution is impossible because of the discovery of genetic information. That's the conclusion of my presentation.
Well, it's interesting how you say evolution is impossible, but I say your God is impossible. How can we be at two such opposing positions?
Well, because the information that prescribes the features and complexity and specificity of the features of living systems cannot arise from anything but an intelligence.
Why?
We have empirical evidence that all living systems were designed by an intelligence. And because of the unfathomable complexity and interdependence of those systems, even down to the molecular level, we can know that that intelligence must be outrageously intelligent.
How do you get that from?
I just explained it in my thesis.
I see a lot of logical leaps, very big leaps.
There's no leap. Everything that's stated is empirically verified by science.
No, I'm not saying that you were quoting anything that was inaccurate, like as far as like how complex things are, and it just like I don't know how you get from complexity to supernatural.
Well, that's another argument. I'd be happy to give you an argument for how complexity we can't get biological complexity by natural processes. That's another argument. The argument I presented was empirical evidence that all life is in fact designed by an intelligence which itself must be non-physical and outrageous, supreme greatness. Because of the complexity of life. So information is a non-material fundamental entity that arises only by a volitional act of an intelligent agent, which itself must be non-physical, because non-physical causes produce non-physical products. When you smack pool balls with a cue ball, you're causing physical things to take place because of a physical action. You can't get something that doesn't exist physically, which is like information, linguistics, and algorithms, to arise by physical actions like pool balls. Physical causes cause physical results. Non-physical causes have non-physical products. See, information is a non-physical product of a non-physical intelligence.
What is non-physical?
Means it's not made of, it's not comprised of, nor is it a property of matter.
How can you demonstrate?
It has no mass, no measurements can be applied to it. You cannot measure it. It has no mass.
I agree with you. Okay. Well, how do you measure or demonstrate these things that
I just did.
No. You're saying that a non-physical thing doesn't have mass. It's not comprised of matter. It doesn't interact with
It's kind of logical, isn't it?
the material world. It doesn't, how would you even begin to demonstrate?
Well, I demonstrated that by explaining that information is not bound to its medium. If you paid attention in the presentation in the beginning, I said that you could write the Bible in a page, you can print it on a book, but you can also type it up as an email and send it to somebody across the world. You can also speak it to someone over the telephone. You can do it. It can move from whatever medium you want it to, and the information doesn't change one bit.
Yes.
Okay. So the information, the medium is physical, but the information is non-physical and it is not bound to any medium. This proves the information is not a physical thing. It is absolutely non-physical. It does not physically exist at all.
Does DNA physically exist?
DNA is a physical medium. Like a Bible is a physical medium encoded with words, DNA is a physical medium encoded with non-physical information.
How do you demonstrate that the information, and I'm using your word, information, that is encoded in DNA, how do you demonstrate that that is not a physical property of the chemicals that make up DNA? How do you demonstrate that that is something exterior?
Well, because it prescribes things that don't yet exist. It prescribes things that are produced by fetal development. In other words, when the cell splits into 2, then to 4, then 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 256, etc. As it develops, these cells are specialized so that the information in them changes so that they are specialized to become a liver cell, a kidney cell, a heart cell, a lung cell, a bladder cell, etc. The organism does not exist yet, but all the information to make the organism is already specified in the arrangement of the base pairs on the DNA. It's already prescribed. So what's already described, the organism comes into existence only because the information, the book is already written on how to make it.
I understand that. I understand how DNA works, more or less. But what I'm saying is, how do you get from that to supernatural? That's the thing.
Because information is non-physical. It requires a non-physical cause.
It's not, well, it depends on how you define information, I guess.
Can you explain to me how something non-physical that doesn't exist physically at all, has zero mass, and is not comprised of matter, can come into being by
what about the internet?
Bumping into each other?
What is the internet?
Well, the internet is, it depends on what you're talking about. It's a concept, but it's also a set of series of computers.
We're using right now, is it, where is the internet? Where is it?
The information passing from your computer to mine, it doesn't exist physically at all.
So is it supernatural? Well,
yes.
I know it is?
Yes, it is.
I wasn't expecting you to say that.
Almost everything is based on the supernatural. There is nothing that could exist without the supernatural. Nothing.
It's electrical, but I mean, there are other physical explanations. We understand how all this stuff works. But
well, the software is comprised of is information encoded from an intelligence that prescribes something to take place or to make something that does not yet exist, just like an organism is prescribed its features and mind-bending complexity of the interaction of its cells at the molecular level all the way up to its organisms, its organs that interact to make the organism live. That
you know,
prescribed by the information encoded on the DNA.
I don't disagree that it is mind-bendingly, astronomically, freaking crazy complex.
It surely is.
I
So
know.
complex in
I know.
2019, we can't decipher it.
I know. It's well, we have but that's beside the point. It's mind-bendingly, astronomically freaking crazy complex. Yes, that is true.
It surely is.
But that doesn't tell me at all that it means magic.
Well, it does mean what you call magic, because information is not produced by anything material. It comes from a non-physical source.
Okay, well, if I write something on a notebook, I take a pen, I write something on a notebook. Is that information something material or immaterial?
It's non-physical. It's been encoded on a physical medium.
It's very physical.
No, the information is not physical, because you can then write it on. You can type it up on a compact disc, or you can send it by an email. See, it's not made. It's not the matter. The medium is not the information. See what I mean?
What happens when your brain stops working? If your brain dies, what happens?
Your soul goes to sleep and waiting for the resurrection. Where the angels will raise you from the grave, according to the words of Jesus Christ.
What is your soul made of?
Unknown.
Nothing.
Unknown.
There is no soul. That's
because it's unknown doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just means it's unknown.
Well, how are you able to demonstrate the fact that a soul exists?
Because information prescribes the features of an organism.
Not because it exists. That's the wrong way to start that sentence. How do you know that a soul exists?
Because you have thoughts, you use language.
Could possibly even exist.
Okay, so let me give you an explanation. You use language. Language is applying meaning to matter and deriving meaning from matter. Okay, so that's a mental process, not a physical or chemical one. So if I apply meaning to the letter A, if I write the words D-O-G, the letters D-O-G, they're just D-O-G. In chemistry, there's just ink on paper. That's all. It's just arranged in a particular way. But there's no such thing as a dog just because I write the word dog. The concept that the letters arranged in that way specify an animal, which is another completely different entity, unrelated totally to the ink and the paper. No relationship at all. So that relationship is not a physical one. It's a non-physical one. It's a mental process, not a physical one. So the application of meaning to matter, or the derivation of matter, of meaning from matter, the arrangement of matter, is a mental process, not a chemical one. So when
mental is chemical. Mental is chemical. Everything that happens in your brain is the chemical process.
No, because information is not bound to a medium, so it can't be the brain.
Well, if your brain dies, what happens? There is no more you.
I disagree.
Well, then you have to demonstrate that something happens if your brain.
I just did. Matter is not. Information is not bound to a medium. Where'd it come from?
I love your enthusiasm, but you did not demonstrate any such thing.
Well, I did. I explained that information is a non-physical entity that requires a non-physical cause. Matter
What does non-physical even mean?
How can physical interactions create something that doesn't exist physically? I'm going to take another 60-second break. Sorry about that, but I hate it that I seem to have dominated the conversation too much, and I'm sorry for that. But this will give you an opportunity while I take my break. Can you explain to us, please, how physical proper interactions of matter, physical only material processes, can produce something that don't exist at all physically, have zero mass, are not made of matter. They don't exist at all physically. You cannot, they don't physically, this is hard for you to understand. I know, think about what I'm saying. Don't exist physically at all. Information does not physically exist. It's only encoded on a medium so that it can be shared. Okay, but the information is not physical. It has zero mass. It's not made of matter. So can you explain to us how information can arise because it doesn't exist physically at all? You cannot give me a pound of your thoughts and I can say, here's a mayonnaise jar, fill it with 13,000 gigabytes of information without using matter. Is that possible? It's impossible.
No.
Because information isn't made of matter. It's non-physical. So while I'm gone, please explain to us how physical processes can give rise to something that doesn't physically exist at all. Be right back.
That was intense. Standing for truth, are you there?
I'm still here, my good man. You know what? If he's going to be taking a 60-second break, you could always take that 60 seconds to, I guess, give your feedback on what maybe Neff said there, or what maybe you feel you didn't get the chance to properly address throughout the discussion.
Yeah, the only thing is that I think that his mic is obviously better than mine, so he can't hear when I'm trying to interrupt. And I mean, that's okay, because I mean, generally speaking, I don't like to interrupt, but sometimes interruption is like a good thing. Like, hey, I need to stop you before you go further so I can explain a few things. No, I think I'm just gonna I'll take the same break, and I know this is probably boring to the audience, but I'll take the same break and then I'll come back and I'll talk to Nephilim himself rather than talking behind his back, even though he gave me permission to do so.
Not a problem. No, I think the audience is enjoying the discussion. It's been very engaging. You guys have touched on a number of topics. Neff, so what we're gonna do here is we're reaching the 2-hour mark soon. If you guys wanted to maybe take another 10 minutes just to kind of maybe sum everything up or touch on something that you feel was maybe left hanging.
Sure.
If you wanna,
hey, I appreciate you holding this thing out. We could go all night, but I mean, I could go all night, but I appreciate you hosting this thing.
No, it's always a pleasure. I love these discussions. I like being on the front line and directly debating and discussing. But at the same time, sometimes I like to sit back and listen and just kind of take it all in. So
okay, so let's. How about you know what I think I've said plenty. How about let's just if you're looking at time is getting close for you, why don't we just let our friend give an account for what he believes, and I'll give a really quick summary of what I believe, like 30 seconds or something, and we'll call it quits for the night, and maybe we can do this again in the future.
Absolutely. And like I said earlier, anybody in the audience as well, there's plenty of channels where we host these debates, these discussions, creation, evolution, does God exist? A multitude of topics. So, put the word out there. We're looking for as many atheists as possible that are certainly, willing to engage in these types of discussions and debates, and we'll hold them every single night, as far as I'm concerned. So, welcome back, Esteban. If you wanted to, Neff, did you want to go over that real quick with Esteban? I'm not too sure if you heard.
I don't know. I'm sure what he said, but Esteban, while you were gone, Standing for Truth was telling us that essentially it's time to close this thing out here. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to talk and say what you want to, and then I'm going to say about maybe 15 seconds worth of stuff. Just tell you, my opinions in a real short nutshell, and then we'll be done with this thing. So take a couple of minutes if you want to, and tell us about your views or your arguments or whatnot, and then I'm going to give myself a 15 or 30-second argument, and then we'll be out of here.
All right. Well, first of all, I appreciate you, NephilimFree. It was definitely fun. I like getting into the more heated, more like intense arguments. You know what I mean? Like, and it's nothing personal, obviously. You know that because we.
Yeah, we've clicked. I've had a conversation with you on the telephone for about an hour and a half. I like it. I mean, you're a very cordial fella. You're not a personally abrasive kind of insulting guy. I find you a little bit different from the typical atheist. I actually like you. I think you're a nice fella, and I'd like to convert you. But that's my Christian thing. But no, I mean, I've enjoyed talking to you, and I enjoy it every time we talk. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that part is excellent, and I love the fact that you have, in my opinion, crazy ideas. Because I mean, I'm sure that you think I'm crazy too. You're like, oh, this guy's lunatic, but no, it's fun, and I will tell you though that in order to convince me of the existence of God and of creation, it's going to be an uphill battle. You're more than welcome to try, and I have no problem. Like, keep on coming back, and we have conversations. I can even be friends with you. Like, we can be, on the side. We can be like, hey, what's up, dude? Let's play some Call of Duty. I mean, I'm not saying that you play that, but you know what?
Well, I have played Call of Duty. I played Call of Duty 1, United Defensive, Call of Duty 2, Call of Duty 4, which was an awesome game. Loved that game. And I was really, if I know I'm bragging, I was a monster in that game. I was really good at it. And so I like those, but I don't play any of the more recent games because my computer really won't stand it. I've got an old video card and my computer won't play anything that was published, say, 2015 or 18 with a good frame rate, kind of sluggish. So, except America's Army. I can play that with reasonably good frame rate because they designed that game in such a way that it can be played on, a majority of PCs, to get the most number of players possible. But, I love computer games. I just don't hardly ever play multiplayer anymore. I've lost interest in it. My interest in Christian apologetics and stuff, it's just taken over, and I just don't really enjoy multiplayer gaming anymore. But I'm with you when it comes to admiration for computer games. I was a gamer back in the days of Quake and Doom and Quake 1, so I'm there with you. I was a gamer from the go.
I do agree with Quake, but I know we're not going to see eye to eye today, but that doesn't mean that I didn't have fun, because I do have fun even if I vehemently disagree with you, and even if it sounds like I'm going for your throat or whatever, it doesn't mean that I mean anything against you as a person.
I get that. I get
I
that.
mean those people who can separate ideas from people, and I know that's hard nowadays, but I can do that.
Well, I hope we have an ongoing relationship. I'd like that, and I still want to convert you.
You are more than welcome to try.
Well, we got to do something about your pride. That's the problem. It's pride that stands in the way.
Well,
Pride goes
gentlemen,
before the fall.
I think that's a good note to end it on. It was a very good, engaging, respectful discussion. So Esteban, thanks so much for coming on tonight. NephilimFree, thanks so much for coming on as well. Hopefully, we're going to do more of these in the future, guys. Standing for Truth is
All right.
out. Everybody have a good night.
Take care, Esteban. See you another day, buddy.
Have a good one.